The Germanwings jet crash and the pilot who drove the aircraft into a mountain, killing himself and everyone on board, sparked a fury of concern about the mental health of commercial airline pilots, whether there's something for every company and passenger to be worried about, and for that matter, if the stresses of the position might make tighter screening of every person in control of lives and aircraft a necessity. Reality Check. Let's welcome into the hardline veteran international airline pilot and the author of Flight to Success, Karlene Petitt, along with forensic psychiatrist and founder of Psychiatric Consultants of Florida, Dr. Daniel Bober. I thank you both for being here today. We're going to focus this on the FAA group that says they are going to review the mental health screenings for pilots. And Karlene, I come to you first because already I know there are unions and pilots that are not happy with this at all, and they say that this is a knee-jerk and unnecessary. What's your take?
Well, having the meeting and having the discussion is not a knee-jerk reaction. Some discussion should be made, but in the reality of being able to test pilots for screening during our annual medical exams is not really a possibility because it's very difficult, as Dr. Bober will probably attest, that you can't, pilots are going to tell you what they want to tell you. And in that short time, you can't do analysis of somebody to that extent.
Then how much time, and I'll direct this then to Dr. Bober because Karlene makes a good point, would you need in order to really get a cohesive check on a pilot, on anybody for that matter, in order to see if there is a mental health issue?
Well, the irony is we don't actually do very good mental health screening for the general population. But I agree with the guest, and the problem is you can't really predict any given behavior at any given time. It's very difficult to do that. And the problem with requiring pilots to be screened is it creates a situation where they become stigmatized and they want to hide their symptoms. What you need to do is you need to create a system of screening that doesn't penalize the pilot if they suffer, for example, from depression. They are allowed to seek treatment and they won't lose their job. You need to create a judgment-free environment where they can actually get treatment without fear of loss of income and loss of their job.
Karlene, let's then go to the job itself. In your experience dealing with so many pilots as you have, do you find that there's a lot of depression, a lot of stress that could lead to something like what happened with Germanwings?
There's, stress and depression, and to the extent that that young man took that airplane is, they're all kind of three different things. There are things that we could do to enable pilots if to help eliminate the stress so it doesn't build into something catastrophic.
What would those be?
One of the simple things is we can allow mental health days. We allow people, if they're sick, they don't go to work or if something's wrong. If companies have sick leave policy, if somebody's just having a really bad week and they're dealing with issues at home, be it children, finances, something, they should have the availability to say, hey, I need a mental health break. I need to call in sick for this trip, and have the right to do that instead of faking an illness. They should be able to take mental health days is one thing we can do. And another thing we could possibly do is maybe build into recurrent training that pilots understand symptoms of other pilots, because we're sitting up there with fellow crew members. Sometimes we're with them for 12 days and we see the behavior when they're fatigued. We see you talk to them for hours. You can kind of, if you had the tools and an understanding, there might be some signs to pick up on things that could be an issue. Okay. And so training and education is probably the best thing.
Let me hit to Dr. Bober on that, because I think you just brought up a great point here, because you have somebody sitting in a cockpit, you have 2 or 3 people there, Dr. Bober, and they're watching each other. You want to be able to tell people what to look for, but how difficult is it to train somebody who's not a trained professional to be able to look across and be able to say, that person's tired or that person's depressed and may do something stupid?
Well, it's not as hard as you think. There are programs in this country right now for police officers to screen people for mental illness. And your other guest is correct, which is if you're spending 12 days with someone a month, you're going to kind of know what their baseline is, and you're going to know when something's off, if they're fatigued or if they're irritable or if they're depressed. And you probably will get to know their personal life pretty well to know if they're having marital problems or relationship issues. So I think that there's definitely something to be said for that. But again, it has to be done in an environment where the person can receive treatment and is not judged or stigmatized for it.
Karlene, knowing full well that commercial airline pilots have the lives of people in their hands several times during a day, could be thousands of lives a day. From your experience then, looking at what has happened with Germanwings and the stress of just that, do we need something like this? I mean, anything additional, or is what we have right now good for the moment?
Well, what we need to do is like Dr. Bober said, make it not a stigma, make it enable pilots to be able to step forward without fearing that they're going to lose their jobs, but also opening up the doors for communication and letting them know that it's okay. Mental health is not a, shouldn't be a black mark to the person if they can get out of the cockpit. But here's the interesting thing is that doctors, I think, there should be some liability or some responsibility to a doctor. If a doctor thinks a pilot has a problem, there should be a built-in avenue that they should contact the FAA, because if the pilot doesn't have the mental capacity to pull themselves out of that cockpit because of that illness, they need help. Somebody needs to help them, and because they're not going to do it themselves.
Dr. Boba, 30 seconds left. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I think the doctor has a responsibility to protect the public. And we see things like this, like in California with what's called the Tarasoff law, where there's a duty to protect and a duty to warn. So if a doctor is treating a pilot and they know that they're a potential danger to themselves or to the public, they do have a responsibility to protect public safety.
I think we've already said it very well here, too. The mental health days, don't make it such a stigma. People have issues. They need to be able to go to their bosses, their airlines, whatever it is, and say, I need the time, and not fear they're going to lose their job. It will keep everybody safer in the long run. Well put indeed. Karlene, Petitt, Dr. Daniel Bober, pleasure to have you both on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
A reminder here on all this that we're talking about safety is the industry's top priority. So what they need to do is make sure that the mental health of their pilots are a top priority as well. Stay with us. This is The Hard Line, the fastest 60 minutes in news.